Welcome, friends of freedom. I'm your host for this event. My name is Valencia. I'm sure you're wondering, who is Valencia? What kind of person am I? What qualifies me to be host of this show? And I'm the right person, whether I'm the right person you want to choose. Now, I'm a person that's just like you, upset with what's happening in our country and having a feeling of loss of control of my life. Blaming myself as if I had done something wrong to cause what's happening in our nation, as well as happening to my life. And of course, the media is telling us all that we're to blame for everything. It wasn't until about 18 years ago when I first heard about the word conspiracies, and then I started looking in other directions to find answers. I did not like what I found. It was unbelievable and scary to me. It made me angry. Then I started learning the truth from many different conspiracy scholars, men and women who dedicate their lives to researching the truth and bringing those truths to us. I wanted to give something back and decided that this was the best way for me to reach as many people as I can and to introduce you all to these scholars. Now, before we get started with our speaker today, there are a couple of items of business that I'd like to cover. Now, first, in order for you to get a full benefit of this interview, please browse to Steve Hempfling's interview page. Type this link into your browser address, www.conspiracytheorysummit.com/freedom. That's www.conspiracytheorysummit.com/FREEDOM. That's conspiracytheorysummit.com. You'll know you're on the right pace when you can see the photo of our guest, Steve Hempfling. Now, there are multiple things you can do on this page, but right now I would like you to just scroll down to the comments section. Go ahead and you can do that right now. While you're listening to this interview, you can post ideas, questions, and feelings that you may have about the subject matter at hand. Now, the second thing is Steve Hempfling will be giving you a free gift as a thank you for being on to this interview. Steve will tell you more about this in just a moment. Now, I'd like to introduce our speaker for today, a man with a sense of humor, dedicated to freedom for the individual and in keeping our Constitution as it was meant to be. Steve was born in Ohio and raised on a farm. He learned about individual rights and the U.S. Constitution from his father, who was active at preserving freedom. His father was in a coalition trying to stop unpacked paper currency from being issued during the Kennedy presidency. Steve has a degree in electronic engineering and has worked at Texas Instruments and in the Silicon Valley, located in California. In 1985, he helped found the Freedom Enterprise Society along with Verl Speer and George Hill. He put his money where his mouth was and challenged the IRS to prove it had a law to require Americans to file income tax returns. That was 27 years ago. Today, Steve Hempfling is the current director of Free Enterprise Society, and the IRS, well, they still have not proven to anyone that it's required to file an income tax return. Welcome, Steve.
Well, thank you, Valencia. It's a pleasure to join you. This will be a good program. I mean, the IRS is something that everybody should be concerned about, and now they're going to be involved with our health care collections, I guess. But the IRS, as far as we can find, really doesn't have any law, and we'll go through that today. I think the viewers will find this very, very interesting.
Well, good. I'm glad to have you as my speaker today, and I'm excited about the light bulb that will undoubtedly go in to a lot of people's heads, much like what it did to me as I was learning and listening to a lot of the things you were talking about. Now, first of all, can you tell us a little bit about your journey and how you were drawn into becoming a constitutionalist? What were some of the belief systems that you were raised in, which we spoke about a little bit in your bio, and what made you to go out on the limb by putting your money where your mouth is, just to bring all this information to the people here?
Well, as you noted, I was an electrical engineer. I was working in the electronics industry, but that, obviously not dealing with law. But we had, most people get a refund at the end of the year, and I was no different. I was a young man. And then one year, even though I had a claim zero and got, I thought, a lot of deductions, they still wanted quite a bit of money at the end of the year. And it made me question, well, what's going on? It made me look around a little bit deeper. And I started getting into, I found some other groups with people talking about the Constitution in relation to the income tax. And that started my journey. And when we looked really, really deep, we found that we can't even find a law that requires a person to find an income tax or file an income tax return. I mean, if we look for a law that requires someone to stop at a red light, which is one of the analogies the IRS likes to use, we can find a law, and every jurisdiction has one. But when it comes to filing income tax returns, the IRS can't point us to one. Congress hasn't pointed us to one. Everybody says it's required. Everybody says it is the law, but no one has been able to show us the law. So that's kind of what I found, but I'm going to take you through the journey of me, how we got there too. So.
Okay, friends, if you're like me, you've had some questions and issues like, when did this all begin? How did it start? Who's in charge? Who's responsible? And I'm sure Steve will be answering a lot of those questions for you. So, Steve, I'm excited to learn about what you know about our Constitution, how it affects us in regard to the income tax. And can you please start by telling us something about the Constitution, like what is it, who's the Constitution written for, and where do we stand as a people in regard to our rights and basically what we've been told our rights are.
Yeah, well, I think a lot of people will be kind of excited to find out that this little pocket Constitution gives you everything. I mean, the American people, the law's on your side every way that we look at it. This Constitution changed the government, and in a way that would keep us free. That was the whole point of our Revolutionary War. The king was into our business. He was in our home telling us what to do. He was taking our property. He was doing all these things, the king, to his people. And when we had the Revolutionary War, they wanted to make a government that the people were free. So the Constitution is really our formula, or would be the rules in Monopoly, or if you want to. This is the rule book of our country. Now, if you read this, you're going to get pretty excited because the government has very limited power in here, and you have all kinds of freedom under this Constitution. The problem is the government doesn't follow this Constitution that closely anymore. If you watch the news, you'll notice that. Each administration in Washington violates the Constitution, in my opinion, more and more and more, because they only have, the United States government has 17 powers in the Constitution, and this Constitution in itself is the supreme law of the land. I mean, everything that we do in the government and these elected officials, they have to follow this document right here. This is what they take an oath to defend and enforce. Every person in government has taken an oath to defend this Constitution, but yet most of them have not read the Constitution. And today in schools, this Constitution is not even taught in most school systems. They teach you about it, but you don't actually get a copy and get to read it. And what I think is really great about the Constitution is because it's really easy to read. When you talk about law, people get kind of bored, or they say, well, I can't even understand it. Well, that's intentional. When we get into the Internal Revenue Code, it's pretty interesting the way they write. It makes it very hard to understand, and that's intentional. Like I say, because then people will abandon the search, thinking, well, I can't figure it out. But in fact, a lot of that law, when it's written that way, isn't really valid law anyway, in our view. It has to be readable, has to be understandable, and the American people in general have to be able to read it, understand it, and know if it applies to them. And when it comes to income tax, no one knows.
Oh, well, that was really good. Can you expand a little bit more on what some of the Constitution rules are? In other words, what are some of the Constitution's rights do we have, like Fourth Amendment, Fifth Amendment, and
Right.
etc.?
Well, one of the things I think is pretty important is Article 6 in the Constitution says this. It says, "This Constitution and the laws of the United States which shall be made in pursuance thereof, and all treaties made or which shall be made under the authority of the United States shall be the supreme law of the land." This is important to recognize. Supreme means the top law. The statutes and other rules that Congress passes does not override the Constitution. Many people believe it does, or that Congress has the power to do that. And the Constitution itself says they don't. In fact, if it continue, that Article 6 continues on, it says, "The judges in every state shall be bound thereby, and anything in the Constitution or laws of any state to the contrary notwithstanding." What that says is if anybody violates, writes a law that's in contradiction to the Constitution, it is notwithstanding. In other words, it should fail. The courts should throw it out. Now, part of the problem today is the courts aren't doing their job as well as they should either. Most of these laws that go before the courts are not thrown out, even though I think they're clearly in violation of the law. Now, if we continue on in Article 6, talking about also the state is included. The senators and representatives before mentioned and the members of the several state legislatures and all executive and judicial officers, both of the United States and the several states, shall be bound by oath or affirmation to support this Constitution. I think we can probably all agree we're talking about the United States Constitution if we're reading out of it. But sometimes I wonder, I've talked to legislators here in California, and they claim to know the Constitution, and when they start talking about it, I wonder what Constitution they read, because it had nothing to do with the one that I read from the United States. But it is very important to recognize that these elected officials are not immune from violating the law. A lot of them believe or apparently think that they are. Now, we have a case here, a court case, which is very interesting. It says Norton versus Shelby County, and here's the quote from the case. It says, "An unconstitutional act is not law. It confers no rights. It affords no duties. It affords no protection. It creates no office. It is in legal contemplation as inoperative as though it has never been passed." That's pretty powerful. I submit there are many things that the federal government has done that are unconstitutional, and they should be void. I think one of the later ones is simply Obamacare. There's no authority in the Constitution for the federal government to even operate within the states, not only with the IRS, but really at any level other than protecting our borders primarily and presenting a unified currency. So if we continue on, the Constitution has some rights in it. The first 10 amendments are called the Bill of Rights. And if we get into that, the Fifth Amendment to the United States Constitution is very important in regards to the income tax. Because when you file an income tax return, what happens is you sign it under penalties of perjury. And when that happens, the government believes that you have waived your Fifth Amendment right, that they can use any information on that form against you in a court of law. You can no longer claim the Fifth Amendment. And they've used this to their benefit for quite a while. But we have a case here talking about the Fifth Amendment, talking about the filing of income tax returns. And this is pretty interesting. And here's what it says. It says, the Fifth Amendment, first, I want to read that part to you. Fifth Amendment says, "No person shall be compelled in any criminal case to be a witness against himself." And then there's a case here. This is the Sullivan versus United States. It's a 1926 case. This has not been overturned. Talking about the income tax, talking about the Fifth Amendment, and here's a quote from the case. "There can be no question that one who files a return under oath is a witness within the meaning of the amendment." Now that means you waived your Fifth Amendment right when you file an income tax return. I think that's very, very serious. You cannot be required to give up a birthright, a constitutional right, in order to pay a tax. We have other court decisions on that as well. Now, even beyond the Fifth Amendment, we have other things that are a problem. But if you're going to waive something, I think this is kind of interesting. What does it waive mean? We have a definition. I want to read part of it for you. It's from a law dictionary. A law dictionary is different than Webster's or Funk and Wagnall's dictionary in the sense that it is used by the courts, and each term is defined and has court cases listed with the term in its definition where they use that term. Most terms are very similar to what you might find in Webster's, but there are some terms that are completely different when they're used in a court as opposed to used in your home. So here's waive. When you're waiving a right under Black's Law Dictionary, 5th edition, in order for one to waive a right, he must do it knowingly and be possessed of the facts. Now I ask you, did the IRS tell you that you're waiving constitutional rights that you can't be required to waive? Did they say that? Of course they did not say that. And here's a definition from the same Black's Law Dictionary on constitutional right. And this is good. A right guaranteed to the citizens by the Constitution, and so guaranteed as to prevent legislative interference therewith. In other words, there is not a legislature, federal, state, that can interfere with these constitutional rights that you have in the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. So I encourage you really to read that, because it gives you all kinds of benefits by understanding how the law works. Now, if you're talking about the income tax, it gets kind of tricky there, but because the courts have said, and we've got a case here we'll talk about, but maybe you've heard the income tax is voluntary, and maybe you haven't. But what I find is interesting is this is how the IRS presents it. So the IRS presents the word voluntary on their website. It's in cases, and what I did anyway, and I'm not necessarily saying for you to do this, but when I first started studying this, I went to a meeting, and the person there was talking about voluntariness of the income tax, and I didn't really think he knew what he was talking about, but he suggested this. He said, Steve, why don't you call the IRS up and ask them if it's voluntary? Well, I did. I did the next morning. I called the IRS agent up. I talked to the IRS, and I talked to an agent there, and I said, is the income tax voluntary? And the agent said something very interesting. The agent said, yes, it is. Now, I expected a completely different answer. I expected him to say, no way, and of course, you're required. So this confused me and threw me for a little bit, so I paused, and I said, well, good. My next thing I said was, good, I don't want to volunteer anymore. And then the agent said something very interesting that I've always remembered. The agent then said to me, but sir, you have to volunteer. Well, what does that mean? Well, that confused me, so I hung up the phone at that point. But I have to go to definitions. We go back to, we have a Supreme Court case here, Florida versus United States. It says our tax system is based upon voluntary assessment and payment, not upon distraint, talking about the income tax. That may surprise a lot of you, because people are in jail for not paying their income tax, as you know, and the courts have said it's voluntary. Now, you should not be going to jail for something that's voluntary. Even the California Franchise Tax Board admits it's voluntary. And right here, this is what I think is really comical, Valencia, is this definition of voluntary compliance on the IRS's own website. It says it's a system of compliance that relies on individual citizens to report their income freely and voluntarily, and calculate their tax liability correctly, and file a return on time. Well, it really doesn't make sense if it's voluntary that you have to do something on time, but report their income freely and voluntarily. I mean, you think about that. There's 90 million Americans go down to the post office on April 15th freely and voluntarily. That's just not true. Seems to me that the IRS terrorizes people. I mean, when we talk about the IRS, it does. It scares people that we talk to. We talked to one woman who got a letter from the IRS, and she almost had a heart attack out at her mailbox. And all it was a form talking about her application. She applied to actually work at the IRS, but she decided not to after that experience. So that's kind of, in summary, part of the problem with the income tax. So we can continue the story here in a little bit. Turn it back to Valencia.
Okay. Well, thank you, Steve. That was good clarifications of what the Constitution says about our rights, and as well as that giving up some of those rights just to file an income tax return. And I, for one, really didn't know that either until recently. Now, for those of you who have joined us late, I'll repeat what I said earlier in the interview. Now, if you're already at Steve's audience dashboard page, then you need to go there now if you're not. In the address box of your browser, type in this address, www.conspiracytheorysummit.com/freedom. You'll know you're on the right page when you see the words audience dashboard, and you can see the photo of our guest, Steve Hempfling. Now, friends, Steve has a free gift, especially for you, as a thank you for listening to us here today at this interview. Now, Steve, your free thank you gift is called Freedom, Taxation, and the U.S. Constitution, and it's a video. Now, in a sentence or two, could you please describe for our listeners what they're getting today in that Freedom, Taxation, and the U.S. Constitution video?
Well, that free video that you get has some of the information I'm giving you today, but it's more in detail, and it has a multimedia presentation where you can see the text of the cases and text of the Constitution, and there's more to it than what we're going to talk about today. And it has a real good bonus on there, and that is attorney Tommy Cryer, a well-known attorney out of Louisiana who himself stopped filing returns, was charged with failure to file, beat the IRS on a failure to file charge, who gives a lot of good information from an attorney's point of view on the problems with the income tax and his solutions to it. Because we can, I think, if the people educate themselves, we can get rid of the IRS, and that's kind of our goal. Maybe not the IRS, but the income tax for the average person has to go.
Oh, yes, that's wonderful, and I would, well, thank you for giving such a informational gift for us. Now, friends, I'll tell you in a few moments how you can get that free gift, but while you're on this page, I want you to find a special offer button. It's big and it's orange, and it's easy to find. So click on that special offer button now. You'll know you're on the right page when you see the word special offer followed by the words Steve Hempfling's Free Enterprise Society package. On this page, you can read all about the exclusive special offer that Steve has put together only for you who are listening to this interview today. Steve, your package is called Steve Hempfling's Free Enterprise Society package. And in a sentence or two, please tell our listeners a little bit about what's in your special offer package that you and your team have put together for our listeners.
Well, it's going to include more information about the income tax, but even more broadly, in part on the Constitution. But one of the videos included in the package has 5 attorneys and a former IRS special agent, a gun-carrying, badge-carrying agent who has now turned against the IRS and says no one's required to file an income tax return. Those 5 attorneys and the former IRS special agent all talk about on the video why the average person is not required to file. It's amazing. I mean, for a lot of people, you're thinking maybe you're thinking, Steve, well, I'm an engineer, I'm not an attorney. And that's true, but these guys are. They're attorneys. They study law for a living. They know what they're talking about. They've done the research, and the income tax just doesn't add up. They cannot find a law requiring it on an average working person. You're also going to, as a bonus, get in their membership on Free Enterprise Society and the support service. Support service will help you. If you're having IRS issues, we may be able to give you some information that would be helpful there. But the regular membership comes with the newsletter, and the newsletter is a continuing education. Quite a bit of information in the newsletters about the research that we're doing or cases that we're involved with, if we have any great successes or national issues on the income tax. And that alone is very, very valuable. And you're going to get a pocket. And you're going to get a pocket constitution of your own, so you can go through it, look at the Bill of Rights, and see all the power that you have.
Yes, thank you very much, Steve. I noticed in your little pocket also there's a little section for jurors, and how jurors can also know how to determine what's right and wrong constitutionally when it comes to a trial for one of these people for failure to submit their tax return. Now, friends, if you like to take Steve up on his offer at this exclusive 50% discount, scroll to the bottom of the screen and click on the Add to Cart button. Not bottom, top of the screen, excuse me. The rest is easy. Just fill in the form and click on Submit Order. Now remember that in a moment, I'll be telling you how to claim Steve's free gift just for listening to this interview. Now, Steve, now that we've learned from you what and who and where all about this Constitution and some of the rights that are actually being taken away from us, now I want you to get right into that income tax return. Who's required to file, who's liable, what is the income tax, is it really voluntary, and all those little tidbits that you learned as you studied, and all those scholars that are also talking about. Go ahead.
Well, one way to start verifying some of this is you can look at your own 1040 instruction booklet, if you still have one. You know, they send it out around Christmas time to most people. But one of the things that's in the 1040 instruction booklet is a page called Disclosure Privacy Act and Paperwork Reduction Act Notice. Now, that may not sound like a very important page, but it is, because the Privacy Act alone requires the IRS, if they're going to ask you for information, and they're certainly asking for information from you quite a bit. In fact, personal financial information you probably wouldn't give to relatives or your neighbors. I mean, this is very, very private information. But the Privacy Act requires them to tell you what the law is in regards to that, if you have to give it, if your response is mandatory. In fact, I'll read it right from the law. The IRS must tell you their legal right to ask for the information, why they're asking for it, and how it will be used. We must also tell you what could happen to you if we do not receive it, and whether your response is voluntary, required to obtain a benefit, or mandatory under the law. Well, that's important, because is it mandatory under the law, as most people believe? So I'm going to look at that section. If you get the 1040 instruction, but a couple paragraphs down, it talks about that. Their legal right to ask for information. So I'm going to jump to that paragraph here and read part of it. Our legal right, this is from the IRS, our legal right to ask for information is Internal Revenue Code 6001, 6011, and 6012A, and their regulations. They say you must file a return or statement with us for any tax you are liable for. Then it says your response is mandatory under these sections. Well, that kind of sounds like it's mandatory, but I mentioned earlier how they're very good at writing words in a fashion that don't really say anything, because they say that you must file a return. Who's they? It's those three sections they referenced. Well, I think we need to look at those three sections before we can really make up our minds. So if we look at the sections that are mentioned in here, and the Internal Revenue Code is a pretty big book, but most of it is not even going to apply to you. What you want to look for is what elements make you required to do anything in there. We did find some requirements, by the way, if you manufacture alcohol, tobacco, or firearms. But the average individual working, we can't find anything really applying to you. So let's look at 6001. I'm going to read part of it for you. Every person liable for any tax imposed by this title. And I'm going to stop right there and go back to the first three words. This is Internal Revenue Code 6001, which the IRS Privacy Act sent me to. And the first three words are every person liable. Now I'm going to ask you, can that section make you liable if it says every person liable? I say no. If you were made liable, you would want to read this section. It doesn't make you liable when it starts off with every person liable. So it must be the next section they're talking about. Let's look at 6011. This is Internal Revenue Code, section 6011. Also mentioned in the Privacy Act as something that made you required or made it mandatory for you to file. And right here, section 6001, I'm going to read part of it for you. First two words I'm going to read for you. When required. Now, Now, maybe I'm wrong, but it sounds like this does not require you when it says when required, the first two words on this section, when required. How am I made required? This is the question that I have asked the IRS since 1985. How am I made liable for this tax? And I've asked that same question also since 1985. So it can't be 6001 or 6011. So let's look at 6012A. This was also mentioned in the Privacy Act, Internal Revenue Code, section 6012A. And this one's a little more confusing. But let's go through it. Returns with respect to income taxes under subtitle A shall be made by the following. Every individual having for a taxable year a gross income which equals or exceeds the exemption amount, except that a return shall not be required of an individual. Now that doesn't make any sense. What I think, I know you're thinking I'm reading this wrong, but you know, when you get if you get the multimedia, the GIF, you'll see the codes. And you can also look a lot of this up on the internet, by the way. The Internal Revenue Code and law libraries or some of them are free. And you can verify this. This is how it's written. What I think is very interesting about all three sections is when the word required is used, it is either preceded by the word when or not. And those three sections didn't require anything. We go back to the Privacy Act, where it said, I want to quote that again for you so I don't get it wrong. It says, your response is mandatory under these sections. And I don't see that at all, because I don't see any response required under those sections. Those sections don't even apply to you unless you are required. If it starts off with when required, then you should read that section. But how do you become required? That's the question that I've asked. That's the question I don't get an answer to. Now, I think what's interesting is we continue on in the Privacy Act. There's a section for people who, if you're giving out information, it's also supposed to protect your privacy. And I marked this section because I think it's interesting. Again, this is personal financial information. You don't want to give to probably your family, even your coworkers, or certainly or not your neighbors. This is something that should be private to you and your family, that you choose to. But it says right in here that they can give this information that you supply to the IRS. They can give it to the Department of Justice to enforce the tax laws. They can, both civil and criminal. They can give it to the cities. They can give it to the states. They can give it to the District of Columbia. They can give it to U.S. Commonwealths. They can give it to U.S. possessions. They can give it to certain foreign governments. I ask you, who's left out? You think about this. If you want your own tax file, a lot of times IRS will refuse to give it to you. You'd have to, we've helped people do this. You can sue under the Freedom of Information Act to get your own tax file. But everybody else can pretty much seemingly have it, according to the IRS's records. Now, continuing on in the Privacy Act, there's a section, the last paragraph says this. It says, please keep this notice with your records. It may help you if we ask you for additional information. I think that's true, because I can't find where they're required, where you're required, or anyone really is required to give them any information when they ask for it. And they're being very vague about it. And this is what I did after I made that phone call, which I talked about earlier, where I talked to the agent, and he said I was required to volunteer. Well, that really didn't satisfy me. So it was getting close to tax season, April 15th, and I had not made up my mind on what I'm going to do yet. So what I did is went to the IRS building in San Jose, California. I had no appointment. I walked up to got this huge lobby. I walked up to this little desk there, and the person there told them about that I've been to a meeting that said I'm not required to file, and I've been thinking about that. But I wanted to talk to you. I said, I want to talk to your people first. And they were very accommodating. This was probably around 1980 when I first started looking at these issues. They gave me two agents in a little room there, probably one of their audit rooms. And I told them a little bit about the meeting I've been to and what they said about the income tax being voluntary and everything. And I wanted to see their side of it. And they were very happy that I came in. It was two women agents. They were very courteous and everything. And I let them talk, and they talked about how great it is to be an American. We have to and all the great things we have here, and how important it is to pay our fair share. And then they went through all kinds of things the income tax pays for, which are food stamps and all these welfare type of programs and stuff that they went through. But when they were done, what I did then was bring up the Internal Revenue Code, and I had a 1040 instruction booklet with me as well for that year, and I kind of went through with these two IRS agents the way I kind of went through it with you. And the agents were kind of taken back. They said, well, gee, Mr. Hempfling, I see why you have a question about this. But they decided that my Internal Revenue Code was wrong or old or something. And they suggested that, or thought that maybe it'd be a good idea to go get their Internal Revenue Code. And I said, fine, that's a good idea. Now, IRS agents who work, agents that work for the IRS, you would think they would be given an Internal Revenue Code. You would think, and I kind of thought that. I mean, they should take it, they should read it, they take it home, and learn it. But anyway, these two agents came back. It took them quite a while, and we were at the Gish Road main building for the IRS at that time. I don't know how many thousands of people worked there, but they came back. It took them 40 minutes to come back, and these two agents kind of sheepishly said, well, we can't find our Internal Revenue Code. And the way they said it made me think that there's only one of those in this building, and it was lost. But it was obvious to me that these two agents have never looked at the Privacy Act and the 1040 instruction booklet from the IRS. They have never looked at the Internal Revenue Code in their life. And that was pretty shocking to me. And of course, at the result of that meeting, I pretty much determined that, that my studies is probably on the right track, that the IRS doesn't have very much authority. And that's how it started for me.
Well, thank you, Steve. That was quite enlightening. I can only imagine what you went through every time you had to go and face these people, and I kind of cringe at the idea that I would have to do that, and that's why I depend on people like you to let us know what you found and give us your experiences, and then go from there. But of course, as you have even suggested, that we should all look on the Constitution, read it for ourselves, and decipher it and make our own decision. And now, all right, friends, by now you should have been to the special offer page. If you haven't, here's the link to Steve's special offer page: www.conspiracytheorysummit.com/freedom. On this page, look for a special offer button. Click on the special offer button now. Now, as you get to the special offer page, you'll read all about the exclusive special offer that Steve has put together just for you listening on this interview. Now, take a look at item number 1. Item number 1 is that CD that Steve spoke about the lawyers and Joe Bannister. There you go, the special agent. It's a 2 DVDs, and 1 CD of data in that one package. Also, of course, if you look on number 2, it's his subscription to his membership. And down at the bottom, you'll see that little booklet he told you about the Constitution. Now, go ahead and take a look. Take advantage of Steve's special offer at the exclusive 50% discount. Click on the Add to Cart button now. The rest is easy. Fill in the form and click on Order to Submit. Now, Steve, we've got a few more minutes to be able to answer some questions. One of them are, what are some of the support services that you give your members?
Well, in the support service, we actually have a research department, and we work with paralegals and researchers in different parts of the country who are researching not just income tax totally, but primarily income tax, but also other constitutional problems and issues. Our paralegals have helped people with income tax problems. They've helped them go to court. And even as a pro per, we don't always need an attorney if you're fairly competent to handle, issues when you understand them. But we've stopped the IRS in many cases from taking property. I mean, you've heard where they steal property. For example, we've probably saved millions of dollars worth of property that the IRS was illegally trying to seize. I mean, most people just don't fight it. They don't know how to fight it. They don't think they can fight it. But I believe that you can. I believe the IRS has very little authority under law. They have a lot of power through our ignorance, I think, is that's it. People think they have the power, but we can't find any of it in the law. We also deal with non-filing individuals, people who don't file returns at all. The IRS sometimes writes them letters. Our support service can help answer those letters, because I believe that you haven't, when you do that or not file returns, you're preserving your rights, and then we can help with that. And we're not tax attorneys. If you're filing returns, that's not something we can help you with, because we don't. And it really, probably in a nutshell, I don't really view this income tax problem as a tax problem per se. I view it as a constitutional problem. And that's kind of how we approach it. So if you're getting letters from the IRS and you're not filing, we always talk about the Constitution and your rights versus, how much tax that you supposedly owe. Because we can't find anything that makes you liable for the income tax. In Tommy Cryer's case, I mean, he's an attorney. He made, a fair amount of money, far more than the average person, and the jury still said not guilty. I mean, he made money, but he could not. The Irish government could not prove that he was liable for any income tax in that case. That doesn't mean we can win every case. You got to have, a judge that gives us good evidence and a good jury. But we can succeed. And the saying that you can't fight City Hall, I don't believe in that. I think you can and should, if you learn this stuff too, because we have other generations. Our children are coming up. It's going to get worse if we don't do something now.
Yeah. And also in your services, do you have like a list of special lawyers that know all about this? Because I know sometimes if we go and seek our own lawyer and he's not a constitutionalist that's really experienced with these insurances, we might, end up hanging ourselves. So do you have like a list of lawyers that you can refer us to and stuff like that?
Well, we know several attorneys. We work with several of them around the country that specialize in these areas. Larry B. Kraft out of Huntsville. Most of the attorneys on that video that we're giving out have worked with us. It's just that even though I've got involved in the 1980s to today, the number of attorneys that I found that I really like it's not a very large number, because most attorneys aren't going to challenge the system or challenge the government. But there's a few of them that are doing it. And, a few of them get attacked also by the government, and they're willing, they understand the risk, but they will stand up for people's rights in these problems.
Oh, thank you so much, Steve. All this is important information that we really, really need to know, and we appreciate you being here to tell us all about this. And hopefully this will start little fires in everybody's heart to go out and look for themselves, get their own proof of the truth, and not just brush it off. Now it's time, friends, to show you how to get your free thank you gift. You need to be on the audience dashboard webpage, and in case you haven't seen this page yet, it's located at www.conspiracytheorysummit.com/freedom. Now, to get the thank you gift, click on the special offer button to get to the special offer page, and then scroll down and look for the box with the red dotted lines that has the heading Steve Hempfler's thank you gift. Fill in your name and email address, and within moments, he will automatically send you your link to Steve's thank you gift. For you that joined this interview late and missed some of what we spoke about, don't worry. We'll be posting the replay in a few moments, and we'll leave it up for 48 hours or so. And if you want to share this free 40-hour replay with a friend, please send them to www.conspiracytheorysummit.com/interview. Also, if you haven't already done so, Now's the time to take advantage of Steve's special offer, because you really, really need this. We all need this because, like Steve and many other people that I've interviewed, this is only going to get worse. And the only way it's going to get better is if we, the people, put the power back to us where it belongs in the first place. Take advantage of this exclusive offer that Steve's given you at 50% discount. Click on the Add to Cart button now, and the rest is easy. Just fill in the form and then click on Submit Order. Friends, thank you for listening to this interview, and Steve, thank you for sharing your knowledge and insights with us today.
Thank you, Valencia. It was great to be on.
Okay, bye everybody. Bye, Steve.